F1 racing is getting bigger and bigger, and they really love adding street races to their schedule. But guess what? The drivers and fans are not happy about this at all. Even though the people who put money into the sport are making lots more cash from these moves, the F1 drivers have plenty to complain about when it comes to racing at certain places. One of the newest things F1 wants to do is replace one of the most famous racetracks ever, and this has caused a huge fight in the racing world. The F1 drivers are not going to stay quiet about this. And if the gossip is true, then we're going to see a massive shakeup in the F1 race schedule starting in 2026. This makes us wonder, is the sport going too crazy with adding street races? And what do the drivers really think about all this mess? It's pretty clear that F1 started growing like crazy ever since Liberty Media bought it in 2017. But that didn't come without problems. Most of the new tracks they added, like the ones in Miami, Jeddah, and Las Vegas, are street races, the kind that F1 drivers really don't like. Before this, street races were mostly just in Baku, Singapore, and Monaco, and even those weren't really the most popular races the sport had to offer. But it became obvious that F1 was going to put money in places where investors could make lots of profit, which is why they went to Saudi Arabia and Las Vegas. Even though most of the sport's fans and drivers were against the night race in Sin City, it turned out to be quite a show and proved that doubt is wrong. But some drivers feel like the cars just aren't made for tracks like this. Fernando Alonso is one driver who isn't happy with where everything is going right now. When he talked about this topic more, he said that the F1 schedule should be looking to add tracks like Suzuka Barcelona and Silverstone. Now, I mentioned Barcelona for a good reason. This is the track that will probably be kicked off the schedule in 2026 and replaced with a street race in Madrid, the capital city of Spain. Even though we're still waiting for official news about this rumor, most F1 news sources have said that the sport is already planning to move the Spanish Grand Prix to the country's capital city for all the obvious reasons. More people will come to watch the show. It will be held in the center of the city, and they'll make way more money compared to what Barcelona is making for the sport right now. This is a move that F1 has thought about really carefully because we're talking about one of the most legendary tracks on the racing calendar. This is the track where teams test their cars because it has a mix of slow, medium, and fast corners, which is perfect for figuring out how the car will work on different tracks throughout the year. Not only that, but Barcelona was always the track where teams used to bring huge car improvements, just because of what I just talked about. So if we're going to lose this track, we might see even more anger and revolt from the team bosses too, since they would lose one of their favorite tracks to make their cars perform better. Getting rid of such a gem would be a real shame for the sport. But if this actually happens, then we can't help but ask, has Formula One become all about money? The planned layout of the Madrid GP does look pretty exciting, but if you look closely at this corner, it's actually going around a roundabout at one part of the track, which makes it pretty weird and something we've never seen before. Even on really tight tracks like Baku and Singapore, this has been avoided or built in a better way. Anyway, Joe Soward was the first person to drop this bombshell in the F1 world about Barcelona being replaced by Madrid starting in 2026 when he posted on his social media. Soward said it will soon be announced that Madrid has won the deal to host the Spanish Grand Prix from 2026 onwards. The race will happen on a semi-permanent track around the IFEMA Convention Center close to Barajas Airport, and the deal will be for 10 years. This isn't the first time that a legendary and traditional track has been put in danger, with Spa also struggling to extend their deal with F1 because of money problems and the track itself being called too dangerous to drive on. Of course, F1 is also a sport that is getting much better with quality and safety for drivers, but the terrible money situation at Spa that has lasted for more than 10 years is also adding to this problem. On top of that, the problems with facilities and infrastructure because the track is so far away are also too hard for the teams to deal with. But that doesn't mean we should get rid of one of the most legendary tracks on the schedule, something that will definitely make most F1 drivers furious. And they won't let this slide without saying something. Max Verstappen has been one of the loudest voices in the racing world when it comes to F1 visiting street races. The only track that Red Bull didn't win at in 2023 was one of these types of circuits, Singapore. When he talked about this topic more, Verstappen said, "In terms of circuits, for me, real tracks are always more fun to drive. People can say what they want about street circuits, but at the end of the day, that's not where a Formula One car belongs." I've told Stefano Domenicali, I think it's very important that drivers speak to them about keeping the real racing in and that it's not all about the outside show. We need to focus on the sport itself. Verstappen isn't the only one who has spoken out against F1 cars racing on street circuits. Fernando Alonso had a lot to say about the latest street circuit in Vegas when talking about this particular track. The two-time world champion feels like the cars are simply not built for the layout that has been worked on so hard in the past couple of years, but for all the wrong reasons, the glamour and the show rather than the racing. Alonso added that F1 cars are not designed to drive 50 miles per hour in slow corners like the ones in Vegas, even though it was Sainz who set the record of going over 224 miles per hour on the long straight in Las Vegas, showing that they can be fun when you know how to put on a good show on the track. But it seems like the FIA isn't really interested in listening to the F1 drivers and their opinions about which direction the sport should go. The fact that besides the street circuits, the sprint race schedule has also gotten bigger from 2021 to now shows that maybe the sport has slowly but surely turned into being all about the spectacle and money factor. The 2024 season will also see 6 of the races having a sprint weekend. And the small victory that drivers were able to get is that they will be able to separate the entire sprint race from the main event, letting their teams work under normal conditions before the race starts just in case something breaks or if they need changes in their setups. Earlier this year, we saw how Haas and Aston Martin were pretty unhappy with the upgrades they brought to Austin, so much so that they actually chose to start the race from the pit lane in order to go back to what worked better for them, a penalty that might not happen in the 2024 season if the changes get voted on by the FIA. It goes without saying that most F1 drivers are not happy with the sprint race event at all, and this time they have the support of the team bosses as well. Max Verstappen has gone as far as saying that the sport should get rid of the entire show and just focus on traditional racing. When talking about this topic more, the 3-time world champion added, "We should just get rid of the sprint weekend and then everyone can just set up their cars normally." Furthermore, Verstappen said that these things wouldn't have happened if the entire race was held the traditional way, and the rush that drivers and teams are put into between the first practice and qualifying is putting a lot of unnecessary pressure on everyone in the garage to try and get the maximum performance with the least amount of time available. Lando Norris has shared a similar view on this matter as well, saying that teams aren't actually getting anything good from sprint weekends, mostly because they don't even know if they're doing well or badly after the race finishes. Christian Horner agreed with Norris's comments, as the Red Bull team boss has talked about how important the fans are in changing the entire story in the sport when it comes to this particular question. When speaking about it more, he added, "I think it's clear that the sprints need to change a bit, in that I can understand the concept and it being action on all 3 days, which for the promoter and for the fans has an interest, but I think the sprints in some cases have been slightly underwhelming. There's no pit stop, it tends to stay in grid order, and it's a little bit like getting a medal for a long run. If they can be a bit more racing introduced, you've got to look at what are the consequences with that. If you were to reverse the grid, if there were points involved, etc., etc." With this in mind, there is a lot that drivers would have to say. If Barcelona gets replaced by Madrid, and even if it doesn't, it just goes to show that the entire sport is slowly but surely moving towards what the investors and money want rather than what the drivers prefer, trying to get as much benefit from every race as possible. What is your opinion on the potential Madrid GP? Let us know in the comments below.